Not all men, I know that, but it's so hard to accept when thousands of them saw a teenage girl's murder photo and called the guy a hero. On the evening of July 13th, 2019, 17-year-old Bianca Devins and her friend Brandon were heading to a concert in New York City, and along with them was another guy named Alex, someone that Bianca had started having feelings for. But Brandon, he couldn't stand it. He hated Alex's guts with this growing intensity because in his warped mind, Bianca was his. He was so fascinated with her ego aesthetic and how edgy and untouchable she seemed that over time, that fascination had slowly twisted into something far more consuming. Obsession. For months leading up to that night, he had been confessing to her just how deeply he felt, how often she occupied his thoughts, and how impossible it was for him to ignore his love for her. But Bianca just didn't see him that way, and she told him that over and over. But being rejected didn't stop him from fiending. If anything, it made everything worse. He started texting her constantly and supplying her with drugs just to exploit her vulnerability when her guard was lowered. But still, none of that ever worked. No matter what he did, Bianca always said no to a committed relationship. And that night, while everyone was having a good time lost in the booming concert music, Brandon looked over at Bianca and saw her. Her lips pressed right up against his. She was kissing Alex. In that moment, something deep inside him just snapped completely. He couldn't stand the sight of her with someone else. Not after everything he just poured into wanting her. And for the rest of the concert, his mind was in a state of pure rage. Later that night, after the concert finally ended, the three of them got into Brandon's car for the long drive home, and Alex and Bianca were sitting awkwardly in the back seat. Bianca could probably feel that something was wrong with Brandon, and she probably knew exactly why, the kiss. So at some point, she quietly texted Alex, who's sitting right next to her, saying, "I think he saw me kiss you." Eventually, they dropped Alex off, leaving just the two of them alone in the car. And as the drive stretched into the early hours of the morning, Bianca, likely exhausted from the night, closed her eyes and tried to rest in the back seat. But sometime around 4 a.m., Brandon suddenly pulled off the highway and parked into a dark, isolated dead-end road. He took his phone and placed it carefully on the dashboard and started recording. He reached under his seat and pulled out a long knife that he had stashed there days before. And after that, he turned to the back seat and woke Bianca up. And in this cold, detached voice, he said, "I saw you kiss him." And Bianca, who was probably exhausted from the whole night and most likely fed up with all of his jealousy at this point, just apologized to him, saying, "Yeah, I'm sorry." Maybe she could sense how upset he was, that she thought apologizing was the best thing to do, but Brandon responded immediately, saying, "Well, sorry is not enough." And as the tension tightened further, Bianca tried reminding him that they were not exclusive. There was no betrayal here. She does not belong to him. And at some point, she asked him a simple, direct question. "Are you ready to take me home?" Thinking that would end all of this nonsense and get her out of there. But in that moment, Brandon realized that if she walked away, if this ended, he would lose her completely. And in his mind, that was something he could never, under any circumstances, accept. So in a fit of rage, he reached for the knife, and with this firm, white-knuckled grip, he lunged toward her and began her in the neck repeatedly. Brandon, sitting there covered in blood, began screaming at her lifeless body, saying, "Why did you make me do this?" As if the responsibility could somehow be shifted onto her. But then Brandon does something that makes this case even more disturbing. He grabbed his phone from the dashboard, stopped recording, and began taking photos of her body. Graphic, deliberate images that he would later post online for the world to see, and thousands of men would come across. And many of those men would respond by calling him a hero, saying, "Wow, you really did the world a favor," claiming that she deserved this level of brutality simply for rejecting him. This world needs a serious reset button. After taking those photos, Brandon stepped out of the car and into the night, not to run, not to hide, but to continue what he had started. He built a bonfire beside the car, and while the flames flickered against the darkness, he pulled Bianca from the car and positioned her body to take more photos of her, posting each one of them with the caption, "Sorry fuckers, you're going to have to find someone else to orbit." Not too long after, Brandon called 911, his voice eerily calm and controlled as he said, "My name is Brandon, and the victim is Bianca Michelle Devins," before adding that he was going to hang up the call and end himself right along with her. An officer immediately geared up and rushed to the scene with lights blazing, and once he arrived, he could see Brandon standing still, holding the knife. The officer immediately drew his weapon and began shouting at him, telling him to put the knife down now. And that's when backup officers arrived, trying to push forward to stop Brandon from hurting himself. But at that exact moment, Brandon gripped the knife and slashed himself hard across the neck. As his own blood was pooling on the ground, he reached for his phone and started posing, taking pictures while he laid across Bianca's body, waiting to join her. Following his self-inflicted Brandon was immediately rushed to the hospital, where he unfortunately, but fortunately, made a full recovery. And I say fortunately because death would have been way too easy of an out for him. In the end, he was sentenced to 25 years to life in prison with the possibility of parole. But is that really enough? He took the life of an innocent teenager. Whatever happened to an eye for an eye? That's all for today. Please be kind to each other, and remember, no means no. Group hug.